Emmanuel walks slowly past the massive granite blocks with his father and two sisters. It's taken the family a full day of bus trips to get here. 12-year-old Emmanuel didn't know why his father wanted to visit this boring place. Everyone around him was quiet and tearful. Looking up at his father to ask him why everyone was so sad, looking at people's names in white inlay contrasting against the black wall, Emmanuel saw tears streaming down his father's face. The family had come to the Kigali Genocide Memorial. The names on the wall symbolized just a fraction of the people brutally slaughtered in one of humanity's darkest moments, the Rwandan genocide. In today's video, we will look at the lead-up, events, and catalyst to this truly unfathomable period of Africa's history, and ask a contentious question. Did an aircraft crash cause the eventual deaths of over 800,000 people? The Rwandan genocide was a perfect storm of history, hate, and antagonists that storm clouds finally burst in 1994. A history of violence. The largest ethnic groups in Rwanda are the Hutu and the Tutsi, which account for approximately 4/5 and 1/7 of the population, respectively. Less than 1% of the population makes up a third group, the Twa. All three groups speak Kinyarwanda, which suggests they have coexisted for centuries. The Twa are believed to have been the first inhabitants of the area that is now Rwanda. They were followed by the Hutu, most likely between the 5th and 11th centuries, and the Tutsi in the 14th century. A lengthy process of Tutsi migrations from the north culminated in the 16th century with the establishment of a tiny nuclear monarchy governed by the Tutsi minority in the central region, which lasted until the arrival of Europeans in the 19th century. The system of patron-client ties through which the Tutsi, with a strong pastoralist tradition, gained social, economic, and political ascendancy over the Hutu, who were predominantly agriculturalists, shows the profound social differences between the Hutu and Tutsi in the past. Nevertheless, identification as Tutsi or Hutu was fluid. The Tutsi were generally believed to be fair-skinned and tall, while the Hutu were thought to be dark-skinned and short. However, the distinction between the two groups was only sometimes readily apparent due to intermarriage and the use of a common language. During the colonial era, Germany and later Belgium presumed that physical characteristics could clearly distinguish ethnicity. They then used the ethnic distinctions found in their countries as models to establish a system in which the Hutu and Tutsi categories were no longer fluid. Beginning in 1898 and continuing until 1916, the German colonial government pursued a policy of indirect control that strengthened the power of the Tutsi ruling class. After World War I, Belgium took possession of the colony and administered it indirectly using the same strategy. Some Hutu factions demanded equality and received support from Roman Catholic clergy and some Belgian bureaucrats, resulting in the Hutu Revolution. The revolution began with an insurrection on the 1st of November 1959, when rumors of the murder of a Hutu leader by Tutsi perpetrators prompted Hutu groups to commence attacks against the Tutsi. Following months of violence, many Tutsi were murdered or fled the country. On the 28th of January 1961, a Hutu rebellion executed with the implicit consent of the Belgian colonial authorities deposed the Tutsi king and abolished the Tutsi monarchy. Rwanda became a republic and a Hutu-only interim national government was established. Independence was declared the following year. Transitioning from Tutsi to Hutu rule was not a peaceful process. Approximately 20,000 Tutsi were murdered between 1959 and 1961, and many fled the country. Occasional outbreaks of ethnic tension and violence resulted in the mass murder of Tutsi in Rwanda in 1963, 1967 and 1973. In 1990, Tutsi-led Rwandan Patriotic Front insurgents invaded Uganda, reigniting tensions between the Hutu and the Tutsi. Early in 1991, a ceasefire was negotiated, and in 1992, negotiations between the RPF and the Hutu administration of long-standing President Juvenal Habyarimana started. In August 1993, the RPF and the government signed an agreement mandating the formation of a transitional government that would include the RPF. The proposal was vehemently opposed by Hutu extremists. Their anti-Tutsi agenda, extensively disseminated via newspapers and radio stations for several years, was further circulated and would later fuel ethnic violence. One event would ignite the kindling of hatred between the two prominent tribes of Rwanda, leading to one of the fastest killing rates of human beings without using gunpowder since the days of the Aztec mass sacrificial killings centuries before. During the lead-up to the genocide, Rwanda was ruled by the despotic Juvenal Habyarimana, with help from his wife Agathe Habyarimana and her family, who were well-connected, powerful Hutu politicians. From 1973 until he died in 1994, Juvenal Habyarimana presided over the Republic of Rwanda as its second president. After seizing power in a revolution in 1973, he governed Rwanda, a volatile African nation, almost single-handedly for over 2 decades. During his reign, the citizens of his nation were forced to recite his name and dance in his honor, much like the cult of personality-type worship we have seen towards the North Korean ruling family. Having founded the National Revolutionary Movement for Development as the sole leader of the one-party state, he exerted extensive control over the nation's political activities. Born into an aristocratic Hutu family, he pursued medicine before enrolling in the military academy. He quickly advanced through the ranks and established himself as a successful military professional due to his aggressiveness and diligence. His military career instilled in him an insatiable desire for power, so he entered politics. In 1973, he conducted a bloodless military coup and gained control of the country after becoming the chief of the National Guard and the police force. The security situation in Rwanda deteriorated throughout 1993 due to turmoil in politics. Armed Hutu militias attacked Tutsis across the country. At the same time, high-ranking adherents of Hutu power, a racial and ethnic supremacist ideology that asserts the ethnic superiority of Hutu, often in the context of being superior to Tutsi and Twa, and that, therefore, they are entitled to dominate and murder these two groups and other minorities, began to conspire how the security forces could be turned against the Tutsis. In February 1994, Romeo Dallaire, the head of the military force attached to the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, which had been dispatched to monitor the implementation of the Arusha Accords, reported to his superiors, "Time does seem to be running out for political discussions, as any spark on the security side could have catastrophic consequences." Habyarimana flew to Zaire on the 4th of April to meet with President Mobutu Sese Seko, another brutal dictator, and then to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania on the 6th of April for a one-day regional summit of heads of state convened by Tanzanian President Ali Hassan Mwinyi. Habyarimana offered to take Saleh Tambwe, the Tanzanian ambassador to Rwanda, on the return journey. He then extended the offer to Cyprien Taryamira, the president of Burundi. Taryamira accepted, choosing Habyarimana's Dassault Falcon 50 over his own transportation. Several Burundian ministers traveled with the two presidents. Just before 8:20 p.m. local time, the presidential aircraft circled Kigali International Airport in Rwanda once before making a clear sky final approach. Suddenly, a surface-to-air missile struck one of the Dassault Falcon's wings, followed by a second missile striking its rear. The aircraft burst into flames in mid-air before plummeting into the presidential palace's garden and disintegrating upon impact. There were 3 French personnel members and 9 passengers on board. Numerous people saw the attack. One of 2 Belgian officers in the backyard of a home in Kanombe, the district where the airport is located, saw and heard the first missile ascend into the sky, saw a red flash, and heard an aircraft motor halt. This was followed by a second missile. A Rwandan soldier in the Kanombe military base recalled, "You know, its engine sound was different from other planes. That is, the president's engine sound. We were looking towards where the plane was coming from, and we saw a projectile, and we saw a ball of flame or flash, and we saw the plane go down. And I saw it. I was the leader of the block, so I asked the soldiers to get up, and I told them, 'Get up, because Kanani, a Kinyarwanda nickname for Habyarimana, meaning famous or invincible, has been shot down.' They told me, 'You are lying.' I said, 'It's true.' So I opened my wardrobe, I put on my uniform, and I heard the bugle sound. All 12 passengers were killed." The downing of Habyarimana's aircraft was the fatal nail in the coffin for peace in Rwanda. It has not been determined who specifically was responsible for the deaths of Habyarimana, the president of Burundi, and their members of staff. Whoever was responsible for the murder, its effect was both immediate and catastrophic. In Kigali, the presidential security launched an instantaneous campaign of vengeance. The assassination of political opposition leaders was followed almost immediately by the massacre of Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Within hours, recruits were deployed nationwide to execute unprecedented massacres. Government soldiers and militias carved their way through the Tutsi population with machetes, or blew them up in churches where they had sought refuge. Encouraged by the Presidential Guard and radio propaganda, an unofficial militia group known as the Interahamwe, meaning those who attack together, was mobilized. At its height, this group was comprised of 30,000 members. Soldiers and police officers urged ordinary citizens to take part in the slaughter. Military personnel sometimes forced Hutu civilians to murder their Tutsi neighbors. Participants were often rewarded with money or food. Some were told they could claim the land of the Tutsis they murdered. But who was responsible for this assassination, and why? The obvious suspects would be his political opposition. But what if this assassination was a part of a false flag operation to use as a pretext for a decades-in-the-making genocide? The RPF theory. Since 2000, multiple reports have claimed that the RPF downed a plane on the orders of Paul Kagame, who later became president of Rwanda. All the evidence of this is highly contested, and numerous academics and the United Nations have refrained from issuing a definitive conclusion. In 1997, 3 Tutsi informants made detailed accusations against Paul Kagame and the RPF, alleging they were members of the elite strike team responsible for the assassination. Jean-Pierre Mugabe, one of the 3 whistleblowers, issued a statement regarding the downing in April 2000. An investigation found that no evidence of such orders existed. Jean-Louis Bruguière, a French anti-terrorist magistrate, launched an investigation into the downing in 1998 on behalf of the families of the French aircraft crew. Based on hundreds of interviews, Bruguière concluded that Paul Kagame had ordered the assassination and issued arrest warrants for 9 of Kagame's associates in 2006. Rwanda severed diplomatic ties with France in protest. In November 2008, upon her arrival in Frankfurt, the German government executed the first of these European arrest warrants by arresting Rose Kabuye, Kagame's chief of protocol. Abdul Ruzabitsa, a former lieutenant in the RPF, testified that he was part of a cell that carried out the assassination using shoulder-fired SA-16 missiles. He was one of Bruguiere's witnesses. In November 2008, Ruzabitsa abruptly asserted that he had invented everything. A few months before he died in 2010, he explained that his recantation is related to my personal safety and the safety of other witnesses. Ruzabitsa had altered his account, claiming he did not take part in the plane's downing, but knew someone who did. What most likely happened in the Habyarimana assassination? The false flag theory. The false flag theory makes more sense than Habyarimana opposition killing him. The Tutsi-led RPF were well aware of years of rumored genocide against its people and would likely have not tried to incite the Hutus. This theory is firmly rooted in Hutu power, which we have mentioned before. The question begs, why would a Hutu organization assassinate a Hutu president? Hutu power political parties and movements included the Akazu, a circle of relatives and close friends of Juvenal Habyarimana and his influential wife, Agathe, also known as the Zero Network, for their goal of a Rwanda with zero Tutsi. The Coalition for the Defense of the Republic and its Impuzamugambi paramilitary militia, and the ruling National Republic Movement for Democracy and Development and its Interahamwe paramilitary militia. The belief that peoples of the Hutu ethnic group are superior is particularly prevalent in Rwanda and Burundi, two countries in which members of the Hutu ethnic group make up the majority of the population. The ideology has been compared to historical Nazism in the West due to its extreme destructiveness. Hassan Ngezi authored the Hutu Ten Commandments in 1990, which served as the foundation of the Hutu power ideology. The commandments demanded Hutu supremacy in Rwanda, including exclusive Hutu leadership over Rwanda's public institutions and public life, complete separation of Hutus from Tutsis, and complete exclusion of Tutsis from public institutions. During the attempted Arusha Accords between the Rwandan government and the RPF, radical Hutus began to accuse Habyarimana of being manipulated by Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The then Prime Minister, Agathe Uwilingwi-Imana, was also vilified. Following the assassination of Habyarimana, which at the time was believed to have been committed by Tutsi extremists, Hutu power forces mobilized militia and murderous mobs to carry out the genocide in Rwanda. The Presidential Guard of the army was responsible for the deaths of Prime Minister Uwilingwi-Imana and several other prominent moderate government officials. Two prominent internationally recognized investigators have identified the Kanombe barracks as the probable origin of the missiles. In 2010, the Mutsinzi report, conducted by Rwandan officials in collaboration with British ballistics experts from the Royal Military Academy, identified a small area as the launch site. This area included a part of the airport, the Kanombe camp, and a small area near the presidential residence. In addition to the Presidential Guard and the Para-Commando Battalion, the Anti-Aircraft Battalion was also stationed at the base. According to a declassified report from the U.S. Department of State, an unidentified source told the U.S. ambassador in Rwanda that rogue Hutu elements of the military, possibly the elite Presidential Guard, were responsible for shooting down the plane. Other U.S. agencies, such as the Defense Intelligence Agency, supported this conclusion, which reported that it is believed that the plane crash was actually an assassination conducted by Hutu military hardliners. Was the assassination of Habyarimana a clear-cut case of politics, or was it mariticide? Mariticide means the killing of one's own husband. Did Agathe Habyarimana have her husband killed because of a fanatical belief system that her husband was about to change with the Arusha Accords? In his 1998 book on the genocide, Philip Gurevich commented on the thinking of the period. Although Habyarimana's assassins have never been positively identified, suspicion has focused on the extremists in his entourage, notably the semi-retired Colonel Theoneste Bagasora, an intimate of Madame Habyarimana, and a charter member of the Akazu and its death squads, who said in January 1993 that he was preparing an apocalypse. One report describes in detail how openly the assassination plot against Habyarimana was discussed in the months preceding his death. At one point, it notes that neighboring Zaire's president, Mobutu Sese Seko, learned of the plot and told Madame Agathe to warn her husband, but she did not. It is rumored that Madame Agathe, as his wife was known, sat calmly in a solarium and watched her husband's death in a fireball that resulted in the deaths of over 800,000 people. Hutu extremists, or a false flag operation by his inner circle, including his wife? Who assassinated Juvenal Habyarimana? Please leave us your thoughts in the comments section below. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.